Hello, my name is Caleb White, and I will be discussing handlebars, minimal templating on steroids. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to first talk about what Handlebars is. And as you can see in the top right corner, Handlebars is a templating engine, and it is used in Node.js Express to render server-side rendering. And as you can see here, it has a way to get the data, kind of like in Vue or in React, and you can use that data and pass it into the HTML and then render it. So I'm going to talk about what it is and the syntax of it, and then we're going to talk specifically about for loops and if-else commands. And then we're going to talk about helper functions, which you can write to manipulate the data before you pass it into the HTML. And then I'm going to talk about partials, which is where you can take the HTML and put it into a separate file, and then you can reference it multiple different times to reduce code duplication. And to make it easier later, if you need to change it, you only have to change it in one place instead of multiple places. And this is known in Vue as a component. And then we're going to go through a family history step by step of where I program and use Handlebars and show you how it works. So first, for the introduction, I'm going to go to the Handlebars.js website. You can see the example I use where we have a title and body passed into the render method, and then we reference them here as variables, and then they get rendered. The advantage of using server-side rendering is that it's really quick and lightweight. You render it and then you pass the rendered HTML to the client, and then it can be cached really easily, and if multiple people are accessing that web page, then it can just send back the HTML that's already been rendered. Now, if the data is changing constantly, you'll probably want to go to more client-side rendering that's more reactive, such as React or Vue, but this works really well for read-only data or data that doesn't change a lot. It's very lightweight and easy to work with. You can also do a couple other important things. So here, if you do 3 brackets, then you're rendering pure raw HTML. So you can, do the p tag and anything else that you want, and it will be rendered as HTML. You'll want to make sure that you know where the data is coming from and that it's safe to use as raw HTML, but this is an important thing that you can do if you need to. Next, I want to talk about nested paths. So here you can see that you can use a child variable below the current context with by author.name. And this is really useful because then it goes from the author to the name and it gets Hunda Katz. Now, what if you want to go up a parent? So here you can do the .. and that will take you up into the parent context. And this is really useful. So here you can see this is a for syntax, so 4 comments, and then each of those comments items in the array has an ID, title, and a body. Permalink is in the parent context, and that is how you access it with the .. The reason why this is important where you access the parent content explicitly is because in some rendering engines, it will automatically traverse up the context until it finds the variable that you're looking for, and you don't want that to happen. You want to be very explicit about what data you're using so that you don't get a parent variable when you weren't expecting it. For example, here we have the JSON objects we're going to be using for our family history example. And here you can see that name is John, it has a birth date and birthplace and an image, and then it belongs to this family where he has a spouse. Her name is Sarah and her information, and then this is their marriage information, and then they have 2 children, Mark and Luke. Here you can see that Mark doesn't have a birth date yet. And so in Hogan or other rendering engines besides Handlebars, sometimes they have it configured to where, oh, the date isn't here and you want it? Well, let's go find it. And they traverse up the tree until they see a variable named birth.date. And here they found one way up here and they say, oh, we're going to render 1800 because we don't have one for Mark. And so it will say, look, Mark was born in 1800. And that's not what you want here. And so it's very nice that Handlebars makes it very explicit about what context you're using. So now that we talked about that, let's go over for loop. So here you can see this each that we talked about is a for loop, and here we're going to iterate over an array of strings. Then you can access them using the dot here, and the index will give you the current index of that item, and so it'll go from 0 to 3 in this case. And here, instead of doing the .. we can do it at root, which will give us the top of the context. And then here we can do, if it's the first item or if it's the last item, we're going to add extra little brackets and a break. And so here you can see what this example would result in the HTML. Next, we're going to talk about helpers. So these functions you can write and then you can use them in your HTML here, and you can pass variables into them. So here we're passing the place location of a birth, and then it comes into this function and we can use it however we want. So here we're going to add in the base URL for the Google Map API, and then we're going to add in the string of the location, so say New York here. And what this will do is we'll actually let you click on this and it will take you to the location New York, USA in Google Maps. This is the family history page we're going to build. Another thing you can do is partials. So you can take your HTML and move it into a separate file and then use that multiple times. In Vue, this is known as a component. And the reason why this is very useful is because Handlebars does some optimization with partials, and so it pre-compiles them for you, and so that you don't have to do that every single time. Also, if you ever want to change it, it's really easy to just change it once instead of every single time you would have used it. So it's a way of abstracting it out and then making it be reusable. So it's really cool. Here you can see this that we had before, and so let's just say we put it in a separate file and then we can access it, and we can say, hey, this is like person partial, we called it, and we're going to pass the root person, and then it will automatically go to here and it will render this whole thing for us. So that's really convenient. So here you can see there's like 5 of these, and instead of having to write each of them, we just use that partial, and that makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now we're gonna do the family history website with you guys. So here we have the data that we had before. So here's John and the information about John and the family. We also have included here public images, so a couple images, boy, man, mom, a couple different CSSs, and the index is empty. And then in package.json you'll want to install HBS, which is handlebars, and then HBS utils, which allows for helpers. And then you'll want to install your Express and anything else you need. So now we're going to write the index.json. So after you import everything that you need, and this is how you import HBS and HBS utils, is through that, and then you pass HBS here. And then you're going to want to write in your routes. So here we are taking the john.json file and we're going to parse it into JSON. And then we're going to pass it into the res.render method. Now here we're going to do some stuff to set up Express to use handlebars. So for every HTML file, we're going to say it's going to be using handlebars.express, and we're also going to register the partials that we have, and in this case we're going to use views partials folder for any partials, and let's also write a helper method. As we showed you before, we're going to do the format place helper method, and here this is the Google Maps API version 1, and you can pass in a query here, URL encoded, and it will search for it in Google Maps. So there you go. Okay, a couple more things. We're going to precompile the partials so it's faster. So let's go make this individual HTML file. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, okay, this is the individual page, and we're going to first start by showing you some person info, and here we're going to use a partial. We're going to call the person partial, and I'll show that to you in a minute, and we're going to pass in the root person, which is John. And then let's give them some spaces, and then we're going to say, okay, so for each family that this root person is part of, we are going to say this family, new line, and then we're going to list the different pieces of the family. So first we'll do the spouse. So if there's a spouse, and if there's a date, we want to display that. So we're going to say if there's a date, they're married on marriage.date. Then we're going to say, okay, is our marriage place? Let's use the format place helper that we just previously wrote, and we're going to pass it in here, and then that's going to be the link, and then data that you will see is the marriage place. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to display the information about the spouse. This one, we're just going to say, go to the person partial that we have and pass in the spouse. Now we want to iterate through each of the children, so we're going to say, if there's children, then inside here we're going to say children, and we're going to say for each of those children, we're going to give it a number list, and we're just going to pass each of those children to the person partial. And it just passes in the current context, which is the child. So this is the individual. Now, we need a couple more things. Let's make a directory for the partial, so here we go. And inside here, we're going to write in our person partial. And we're going to say, okay, so for each person, we're going to look up the image that they have associated with that person. So it's going to be in the images folder. Okay, next, we're going to do the name of the person. And we're going to say, okay, so if there's a birth information, then we're going to display it here. So here what we did is we said, okay, we're going to display the birth information, so there's a date, and then if there's a place, we're going to say in the place. And this place is going to be a link to the Google Maps API. And that's all that is. And then for each person, we're going to iterate, or we're going to use this partial again and again. The only other file we need is this minimal layout. So this is the overarching layout of all the HTML files. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say the title is the title that we pass in. And here you can see how we're rendering with raw HTML with the 3 brackets here. Okay, so let's see if this works. So a couple things I had to do to change really quickly is I took the break out of here, and then I also renamed this to person instead of personal partial. So that made it work. Now let's go over here. So here we can see that person is John, and the birth, and then their marriage, and then their children. And the images are correct, and then here you can click New Jersey. The Google Maps will take you to New Jersey. So that's cool. Let's go back. Everything is being rendered using Handlebars, so it's really quickly to reload. So it's really nice. So thanks for listening.